Greetings and hello and buenos dias and welcome to the introduction for City of God. Awesome flick. Great flick. Even with subtitles that you have to read. This particular film has a 99.9% student approval rating. So if you don't like this one, you better keep it to yourself because you're in the vast, vast minority. Awesome. Instant classic. City God. Made in 2002, so it's over a decade old. Doesn't matter though. It's a historic crime drama period piece that still explains a lot about what's going on in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil even today. So it's a over 10-year-old film that's depicting events from 30 or 40 years ago, and it's still timely. So let's do this. Film was directed by Fernando Meirelles. It is rated R for mad violence, gun violence, drug use, a depiction of drugs, language, sexual innuendo. It's got a nice smattering of all those rated R stuff, but nothing that's so far over the top that's going to offend you too terribly if you've ever seen an R-rated film before. Now, here's the kicker that scares the heck out of a lot of American students. The runtime on this is 130 minutes. That's over 2 hours. Oh my gosh, 2 hours with subtitles. You'll never make it. Yeah, you will. People love this film. They don't want it to end. So it's over 2 hours, so allot your time carefully, but you're going to love this thing. It is from Brazil. The language is being spoken is Portuguese. Why would that be? And the filming locations are pretty much everywhere that they say they are, in and around the vicinity of Rio de Janeiro, a major world city, the second biggest city in Brazil, and it's all filmed somewhere, either in the city or nearby, and including a sister city. Just a piece of it's filmed in Sao Paulo, and that's on location too. Word to the wise on this one. I have in times past used cinema that would be considered, say, human drama. You could watch it on a small screen or on your computer. It's no big deal. This is an epic, big-time, awesome, great film. You want to watch this on as big a screen as you can, in a darkest room as you can. So get as close to cinema scope as you can possibly get on this one because it's just a delight. A masterfully crafted film all the way around. You're going to enjoy the plot and the story, but you want to see it on a big screen. Having said that, also a word to the wise. Watch the ending credits. Not all of them, but you'll see what I mean. There's going to be a video, pictures and then a video that pop up during the ending credits. Kind of like all those teasers they do in the Avenger films, but it's pretty close to once the credits start, a piece of video is going to roll, and I want you to watch that piece of video. Once the video stops, you can stop watching it, but check out some of the credits, okay? Well, let's go ahead and set the geographic and historic and factual setting for this so you get even more out of this. City of God. We're going to go south of the border for this one, and we're going to head down to Latin America. Specifically, we're going to head to South America, and more specific than that, we're going to head to Brazil. Brazil is the largest country, both in South America and Latin America as a whole. It's the world's 5th largest country by area, by geographic area. It's just huge. It's also the 5th largest country on planet Earth by population. Over 200 million peeps living in Brazil, and that's a number that's going up. Not rapidly, but it's still an expanding population. It's also an expanding economy, and I know you've probably heard about this or learned about it in class or seen some news stories, but Brazil is a BRIC country, B-R-I-C, which means it's a rapidly developing economy that just has a lot of growth. It has a growing middle class. People are getting rich there. Still got a lot of poor people, but it's a happening economy on planet Earth right now. It is a regional leader. Brazil is to Latin America, or Brazil is to South America, much like the United States is to North America. It's the biggest economy. It's it's where the energy is. It's the biggest population. It's all that stuff. So Brazil is much like the United States, and it is a kind of what I call a second-tier world power. It certainly is a regional leader within Latin America, and they speak Portuguese. Why would that be? Because it used to be a Portuguese colony. The Spaniards took over all the rest of what we consider Latin America, from Mexico all the way down to Chile and Argentina. But the Portuguese carved out this area that would later become Brazil. And Brazil is, to this day, the largest Portuguese-speaking population on planet Earth, dwarfing the mother country of Portugal with 200 million Portuguese speakers. So that's what you're going to hear spoken in the film. But I've heard it's close to Spanish, and that if you know a little bit of Spanish, you can go a little bit back and forth. But I don't speak neither one of them, so I got to read the subtitles, and I have a feeling most of you will too. Now, when we think of Brazil, most of us immediately think, oh, Brazil, it's down in South America, and it's jungle and the rainforest around the equator, and they got the Amazon River that flows through it. That's all big rainforest jungle. Yeah, but remember, this is a really giant area, big country, fifth biggest country on planet Earth. So there are big sections of the interior that are rainforest, and some of the biggest stands of rainforest left on planet Earth are in the Amazon basin. But the 200 million peeps mostly don't live in the interior. Most of them live on the coastal margins and the coastal areas all down Brazil. And specifically, the further south you go, the more peeps you're going to run into. In fact, where we're going to be for this film is Rio de Janeiro and its sister city, Sao Paulo, and that's what we call the southeastern quadrant of Brazil, where Mondo cities with Mondo peoples are located. So this is a film mostly in Rio, a little in Sao. Okay, well, let's talk about those for a minute more. Rio de Janeiro is one state of 27 states in Brazil. It's a city as well, which is why it's confusing, perhaps to outsiders. But I liken it, in fact, it's identical to saying New York, New York. Well, that's not confusing to you, is it? New York's a city in a state called New York. Rio de Janeiro is a city inside of a state called Rio de Janeiro. Sao Paulo is the same way, but we'll get to that in a second. Brazil is very similar to America in its political structure. They have 27 states. America has 50. But other than that, it's about the same. It's pretty darn close. And they elect their president, Dilma Rousseff, just like we did ours, Barack Obama. So in many political ways in the state structure, it's very similar. Now, back to Rio. It's the second largest city in Brazil, second largest economy in Brazil. It's only second to Sao Paulo, the sister city I've now mentioned several times. And here's a couple of points about some of these cities that I want you to understand and know. Rio may have the greatest name recognition because we think, oh, Rio and tourists and there's beaches and all that stuff. Yeah, Rio has a lot of name recognition, perhaps the most, because of the beaches, because of tourism, because of its awesomeness, because it's hosting the World Cup and the Olympics. And Rio actually used to be one of the capitals of the country. But since 1960, Brasilia is the capital of Brazil. Makes it easy to remember. It was a planned city, planned to be the administrative and legal and political capital of this place, and it moved to Brasilia. Sao Paulo, south of Rio, is the biggest economy. It's the major industrial and economic powerhouse of the Brazilian economy. Sao Paulo is the anchor of the whole Brazilian economy. It's the engine. It's a big deal. Rio is a big city too and a big economy, but Sao Paulo is the bigger one. With 20 million peeps, Sao Paulo is also the most populous city in Brazil. It's one of the most populous, if not the most populous in South America. It's a top 10 world city. It's the biggest economy, perhaps in the whole southern hemisphere. And as I suggested, much like Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo is a state and a city. So New York, New York, Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Rio de Janeiro. Oh yeah, that's right. We're talking about Rio. Let's get back to that. So Rio is a state. Rio is a city and a state in southeast Brazil. Second largest city by population. Second largest economy by dollar bills, y'all, in Brazil. It is the most major tourist destination, and that's why it has such name recognition. It's one of the cultural hearts of Brazil. And it's hosting the Olympics, and because of all this tourists and everybody who goes down there, it's just a really great place. It's a city that's been growing exponentially for like the last 50 years. Kind of when the events of this film start is really when Rio starts to explode population-wise and growth-wise and become a major metropolitan area. Same with Sao Paulo. Exponential growth in the last 50, 60, 70 years. And you could actually liken this to many Latin American cities all over Latin America. And this is because, one of many reasons, but as Latin America has industrialized, and Brazil in particular, let's stick with Brazil, as it's industrialized, as it's become more developed, as it's gotten richer, people have been emptying out the rural areas, leaving the countryside, and coming to these major metropolitan areas, which have been swelling over the decades with more and more people, with high population growth rates to begin with, but with more and more people leaving the countryside, coming in to get a job in the city. Whether that mythology is true or not is something else, because what it has resulted in is a lot of poorer people in and around these major metropolitan fringes. Back to the film, because this film is genius in that it covertly is going to show you the story I just outlined. That is, it's going to show you over time the urban growth, specifically here in Rio de Janeiro, over a series of decades. That's going on in the background, because what the storyline is, it's a great crime drama, and the storyline, overtly the film is about depicting the growth of organized crime in Cidade de Deus, suburb of Rio de Janeiro. Suburb. And Cidade de Deus is City of God. And it's a suburb of Rio de Janeiro. And the film is depicting growth of the place behind the scenes, while overtly in your face showing you growth of criminal elements from the 1960s all the way into the 1980s. 1960s to the 1980s. Boy, that feels like a test question. It outlines it in the film. It's kind of in three parts. You'll see it, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. But let's get back to the place. Cidade de Deus, the city of God. What the heck is that? Where the heck is that? Well, let's start with the where part. When you hear of Rio de Janeiro, you likely think of the Copacabana and the sexy people and the tanned, bronzed bodies of beautiful young people on the beautiful white beach, white sand beaches of Rio, and yes, that's why it's a major tourist mecca. It's an awesome place. Rio itself is a big city that faces the bay. So it's a bay area with beautiful beaches like Copacabana and Ipanema. Maybe you've heard of some of these things. And just behind, and that's on the eastern fringe. So it's a big city, and on the eastern fringe of that is where the coastline is, where all the beautiful beaches and the tourists go, and hotels. Just behind that is the kind of city center. The business, financial, industrial hub is just behind that on the east side. Okay, so on the east side of all this. But like any other major metropolitan area on planet Earth, where are the poor people at? And the poor people are on the kind of fringes. And so what you're going to see depicted in this film, the intentions of the filmmaker are to show you the western fringes of the slightly poorer, if not radically poorer, western fringes of this great world city that we all recognize. So on the western fringe, in a very specific area, in a very specific and very real planned neighborhood named City of God. And this is a planned neighborhood in real life that was founded in 1960. 1960, that's your bookend. City of God was part of a state policy to systematically remove favelas from the city center and city edges over there on the east where all the rich people are, and move them out to the western fringes, settling all those poorer inhabitants off on the periphery or fringe, which was, at the time, back in the 1960s, it was the sticks. There was nothing out there. And do pay attention to the beginning of the film. It looks like they're in a dirt desert. There's nothing out there. At the time, that was the western fringe. But I may be throwing a term at you don't know yet. What's a favela? I said favela. It's a very Brazilian term, but I think it's applied across most of Latin America now. In Latin America, when you're looking at urban areas, cities, it's kind of a reverse of the way we look at them in America. Meaning that in America, where are the poorest inhabitants of a city, the people with no resources, they're in the city center, in a slum, or the ghetto, which is in the city center, because in America, the historic trend has been that the more money you have, the further outside the city you go, into the rich white suburbs. Well, it's the reverse in Latin America. The city center is the money territory. Most expensive property, always has been, always will be. And so where do the poor people live? They're pushed off to the edges. So whereas in America, we're like, well, the middle is where the ghettos would be, say, in New York City. In Latin America, that's where the money is in the middle, so the poor people are on the fringes. So that negative connotation of inner city or ghetto in America is reversed. And favelas are these poor, very poor areas on the periphery or edge of metropolitan areas that are usually ramshackle shacks, cardboard, corrugated, cardboard and metal and tin and cinder blocks that people just build shanty towns out of that over time kind of become legitimized and more permanent. The first favelas appeared in Brazil in the late 19th century and were built by soldiers and freed slaves who had nowhere to go and nowhere to live. And they were originally called African neighborhoods because that was predominantly who was there, was freed slaves with no possible land ownership or no options to live anywhere else. They go to the urban fringe hoping to find a job and build a little shack to live in. Most modern favelas, though, have cropped up since the 1970s due to that very rural exodus that I referred to. That is, for the last 50 to 60 years, people have been leaving the countryside to try to come get a job in the city, and they are coming with no money, so where are they going to live? On that fringe, that periphery or fringe of the city in these very poor areas. Now, again, the entire movie that you're getting ready to watch is in one of these favelas, and they are marked by kind of hodgepodge buildings made of found materials, like I said, cardboard or scrap metal or brick or cinder block. But over time, if they hang out there long enough, they become more legit with cinder block structures as people living there maybe do get a job shining shoes or be able to save some money and build up their little house. But here's what I want you to understand. They're not really incorporated kind of legitimately by the city. So they're on the fringe of Rio de Janeiro, but they have no city planning. No one's built the streets. The streets are more like alleys between people's structures that they've just built. There's virtually never any running electricity. You'll see electricity that is usually stolen off of lines that people just kind of jerry-rig and bring into the favelas off of legitimate phone lines and electricity lines from the city. There's usually no sanitation, no running water, no sewage, no trash collection, no ties to legitimate city services that we consider kind of staples of living in a metropolitan area. This would include policing or police presence. Now, this is a historical document you're getting ready to see, a historical piece, I should say. But even in today's world, 2014, perhaps 6 or 7 or 8% of Brazil's population of over 200 million is technically inside of one of these favelas right now. So you're looking at 10 or 11 or 15 million people in an area with no legit electricity, running water, sanitation, or police service, much less schools or education or anything like that. So what you're getting ready to witness is a very realistic evolution of a favela. It starts on the western fringe in the sticks of what was Rio de Janeiro back in the 60s. And what you're going to see is that over time of several decades, the city of Rio de Janeiro expanding out while that favela itself is growing to meet, and now it's all just one big, huge urban area. I know I've already spoken too long on this intro, but let me say this one last thing and then we'll get to the film. Keep this in mind the entire time you're watching the film. Most people never get this. They never change locations. So what you're going to see depicted in the opening scenes and the closing scenes of the film is the same neighborhood, and that's the whole point. City of God was started intentionally with some low-budget government housing that's built in the 1960s. And these folks in this area stay there the whole time. And what you're going to see is the changing landscape of the city itself over several decades. And that continues right on up into today's world. We'll pick up there with the current state of the City of God and some of the elements of what you saw in the film. But let's go ahead and watch the film. Enjoy City of God. I know you will.